You've heard of Laika, the Russian space dog, but have you ever heard of Ham, the Astrochimp? Ham was part of a Project Mercury program to test whether humans could survive and work in near zero-G conditions. He was one of 40 chimps trained at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico and quickly rose through the ranks as one of the most adept, selected for his intelligence and his ability to follow instructions. Over 18 months, Ham was taught to press a lever within 5 seconds of seeing a flashing blue light. If he did it successfully, he was given a piece of fruit. If he didn't respond quickly enough, the soles of his feet were zapped with a light electrical shock. Unlike Laika, who was used to see if living creatures could even survive the violence of a rocket launch and later weightlessness, Ham's mission was to test whether or not capsule occupants could perform basic cognitive and motor tasks. As a great ape, Ham was the closest thing to a human being that NASA could send to space. On January 31st, 1961, the 3.5-year-old Ham was strapped into a cylindrical spacesuit and launched into space on a Mercury Redstone 2 rocket from Cape Canaveral, Florida. He was hooked up to a slew of computers back on Earth, monitoring his vital signs. He appeared unaffected by the G-forces of launch, 17 Gs, and experienced weightlessness for roughly 6.5 of his nearly 17 minutes in space, during which time the same tests he'd been trained to perform on Earth were duplicated in the spacecraft. He carried them out in space just as well as he had back on the ground, if a fraction of a second slower. He splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean 130 miles from where he was supposed to land and was recovered by a helicopter from the USS Donner before he could drown. Once back aboard the ship, he shook the captain's hand and enthusiastically accepted his payment, a juicy apple. Though his capsule had suffered a partial loss of pressure at some point in the mission, Ham's spacesuit protected him from harm. His only injury was a bruised nose. In fact, the only part of the mission that he really didn't seem to enjoy was the horde of press snapping his picture after the fact. I should point out that while I keep referring to him as Ham, that's not what his trainers called him. They referred to him as Number 65. After the public turned on the Soviet Union following Laika's death in orbit, NASA felt that giving the adorable chimp a name would only invite bad press should something go wrong. He was only granted the name Ham after the mission, an acronym for the laboratory where he did his training, Holloman Aerospace Medical Center. Ham was an instant celebrity, featured on magazine covers and television documentaries. He retired from NASA in 1963 and was transferred to the Smithsonian's National Zoo in Washington, D.C., where he lived for 17 years. In 1980, he moved to the North Carolina Zoo, dying 3 years later at age 26 of heart and liver disease. His remains were buried at the International Space Hall of Fame in New Mexico, following a memorial service complete with a eulogy. 3 months after Ham's flight, the cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to journey into outer space. Alan Shepard did the same for the United States just weeks later.
Stay curious, my friends.